Hey, Habanatic here. Majority of people getting into the hobby, not all of them, but the majority of people just getting into the hobby, they usually start with a Tetra. And the reason being is Tetra are pretty cheap to buy, and they're also good schooling fish. So they're just generally a pretty popular fish for people who are just getting into the hobby. Now, Tetra fish, they come from the Rio Negro in Brazil. It's a relatively slow-moving river. That is true. But it's all about perception. It's all about comparison. They call it a slow-moving river because when compared to other fast-moving rivers, very fast-moving rivers, you could consider the Rio Negro to be slow-moving. But if you were to stick your hand or your arm down into the Rio Negro, you would feel a relatively strong current. And with that being said, because these fish come from the Rio Negro in Brazil, you want there to be some kind of flow. One thing that I've always wondered about the design of fish tanks, a lot, and I'd say most of the tropical fish that you get in a fish store come from the Rio Negro, or a river basin, or a river from China. It's always from a freshwater river system. So to me, the entire design of a tank, the way it comes, so let's pretend that we bought this tank brand new. What would it look like? Well, it would look, you'd have the tank, you'd have a lid with this hood light attached to the lid, and you would have a cutout in the back where a hangback filter would hang, and the water flow would be dropping down the center, down into the center, much like it's a small pond with a waterfall. Now that doesn't emulate what these fish want in their habitat. These fish and most other fish in the hobby come from rivers, so it's always kind of confused me as to why the filter is mounted on the back in the midsection. Why do we not mount our filters the long way? Because that is much more like a river. If you have filtration or water flow coming from this side and pushing, it'd be much more like a river that way. I find that the entire design of aquariums in that regard is pretty flawed. I think that if aquarium makers were to come out with a river brand where they design the hood differently so that the light still sits where it sits, but the filter housing is on the end of the tank so that it can emulate an actual river, I think that would be a really good selling point for tank makers. So any aquarium tank makers that might be watching this, take some notes down, because I think that would be a really good idea for marketing to create the river tank. But anyways, I digress. My ideal idea for a filter, what I originally kind of thought about doing, was having like a circulation sponge filter, like submerged. As you can see, I have one here. What's going on is the pump is pumping water up to the top portion of the water and creating this nice top current. And I've got it going right up against my first heater. And my first heater is going to carry heat in that current over to this section, and then this filter or pump is going to pump the water down. And as you can see, what happens here from this effect is you've got the water coming this way, and then it gets pushed down, and it creates this kind of whirlpool effect. Right here you can see it circling. Well, with that whirlpool effect, it carries the water, and you can actually see it traveling. So let's follow it. You've got this current here, and it comes all the way back to this side. So what's happening is I'm getting a full circle. Another way that you could make this happen, and this is the idea that I had originally, but I wasn't able to execute it. Originally what I was thinking about doing was putting hang on the back filter on this side, and then attaching a hose to the intake of that pump and feeding the hose to the other side of the tank with a sponge on the ground on this side. So in theory, what would be happening in that scenario is you would have the water being pumped this way and being sucked from the other side of the tank. So you would have that full circulation effect. That was my original idea, but I didn't have the means to make it happen. So this was kind of my next best idea. Again, this pump was failing. Well, not really failing, it was just not doing very well. So I disassembled it and did this, and took another filter I had laying around and hung it on the back this way to keep the circulation going. And so far, it's been working really well. The fish love playing in the current. My shrimp particularly love playing in the current. I have a short uploaded of one of my shrimp playing in this current. You should check it out. It's actually pretty funny. But yeah, I digress. Flow in a Tetra aquarium is pretty much everything when it comes to the overall health of your ecosystem, of your plants, of your bioweb, of your fish. That flow is going to give them more nutrients. But then the reason for that is because the water is actually covering more surface area in less time, which means it can deliver nutrients in less time. So if that's something that you want to consider, is adding more flow to your tank, I would suggest first try taking the lid off of your tank, because it's going to create humidity on the top anyways. I don't like a lidded aquarium. There's a few reasons. The only reason I would ever put a lid on an aquarium is if I had a breed of fish that's notorious for jumping out of the tank. It's really the only reason I could think of to have a lid on the tank. But otherwise, try taking the lid off your tank and moving your filter over to the side to create more of a river system. I think you'll notice that the behavior of your fish will change dramatically. They will seem a lot more lively and they'll seem a lot more playful. So yeah, I'll give the fishies here a quick little feed, and that'll pretty much wrap this video up. I just wanted to give my take on circulation and filtration and the way I'm going about it in this 29 gallon. It's been working pretty well. Boop.
Get it. Yeah, get that food.